it's 2 p.m. sharp Manila time, so let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, evening, wherever you're joining us from. And please be warmly welcome to today's webinar, Empowering Women as Drivers of Change in the E-Mobility Sector. Very exciting topic for today. My name is Johanna Siljakus, and I work for the Emerging Areas Transport Sector Office at the Asian Development Bank, the ADB, and I'll be moderating today's session. So if we can have the next slide, please. This webinar is organized under the umbrella of the E-Mobility Support and Investment Platform for Asia and the Pacific. This is an initiative for sharing knowledge and building capacities with the objective to promote the scale-up of e-mobility initiatives in the region. And the platform is managed by ADB and supported by GEF, the Global Environment Facility, and UNEP. So you can see the website to the e-mobility platforms, or the link to the e-mobility platforms website on the screen now. The recordings of our past webinars and other events, as well as other materials, can be found on the platform's website, so do visit that one. So today's webinar, Today's webinar is the last of a three webinar mini-series supporting people and skills in the just transition to e-mobility. So this mini-series looked at different aspects of just transition and gender topics in relation to e-mobility. We previously looked at planning of gender-responsive e-mobility systems, as well as reskilling of workers in the for emerging needs in the sector. So you can find the recordings of these previous webinars on our website. We'll post links to those in the chat a bit later today. But if I can have the next slide, thanks. So in today's webinar, we'll be discussing the opportunities for putting women in the driver's seat for the e-mobility transition. That's both figuratively as well as very concretely. So as many of you have surely heard, women remain largely underrepresented in the transport sector. There's some variation between different sources, but only approximately 15% of the transport workforce globally are women. So this e-mobility transition, which will require quite a lot of structural changes to take place in the sector, can be seen as an opportunity to engage more women in the transport sector itself. There could be many benefits of this for the sector. So in terms of a more diverse workforce, which always brings obviously many benefits to companies and to the government, as well as a larger pool of workers per se, getting more people from both genders or all genders to work in the sector. So, but it also has opportunities for enhancing lives of women and livelihoods through more opportunities in that sense, in terms of creating livelihoods, and also a sense of empowerment for women. So the approaches for engaging more women, the different roles that women could take on, are of course as diverse as the sector itself. And today with us, we have a fantastic panel of experts with whom we aim to explore at least some of these perspectives relating to this very diverse topic. So let me introduce them at this stage. So our panelists will be in the order of appearance of the screen here. So we have Keisha Mayuga, she's advisor at GIZ, and working with the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiatives, TUMI, where she works on mobility topics, including gender and social inclusion, popular transport electrification, and health, as well as the Women Mobilize Women initiative that we'll hear about in a bit. We have Neeti Katosh. She's gender specialist at the ADB, working on gender equality and inclusion in private sector investment projects and operations, in particular, including gender-lensed investing, gender action planning, and impact measurement. We have Shritu Shrestha. She's co-head of the research unit UN Habitat Collaborating Center at the Wuppertal Institute. And she's specializing in climate change topics with a particular focus on low carbon and climate resilient transport systems and urban development in developing countries. And last but not least, we have Yogesh Kumar, founder of Even Cargo. His work focuses on opening non-traditional livelihoods for women in the platform and gig economy. So Even Cargo is India's first all-women fleet logistics company, and it supports women from underserved communities into last mile delivery and green mobility roles. So, if we can have the next slide, which is the agenda of the session. So today we'll start with brief presentations by each of our speakers, and then we'll continue into a panel discussion. We have 1 hour for our whole session, and we'll start with Keisha's presentation, then continue with Yogesh's, Shritu's, and Niti's presentations before moving on with the panel. We'll try to get in some questions from the audience. It might be that we are a bit tight on time for this since we have a lot of different topics to discuss and hear about. But I can have the next slide where you can send us your questions. And you can do that by pressing the More button at the bottom of your screens, and you will see a Q&A button there. So you can post any questions you may have through that function, and we'll try to get through at least some of them. So we are also have muted your microphones to ensure a smooth session, and the webinar is recorded. The recording will be available on the platform's website. But okay, now I've spoken enough, so let me hand over to Keisha from GIZ for her presentation on the Women Mobilize Women initiative by Tumi. So over to you, Keisha, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and thank you to ADB for this putting together this relevant webinar series. So again, my name is Keisha Mayuga. I work with GIZ, or the German Development Cooperation Agency, and I just want to frame why it's important to include women in e-mobility, because it's such a key factor to really this just transition. And I hope you can also hear and see my screen properly. Didn't check, but yes, okay. So just a little introduction for everybody who is not yet familiar with Women Mobilize Women. We work towards building more feminist transport and mobility systems in our cities by empowering women as workers and users, and also informing decision makers on the importance of inclusion, of using a feminist lens. And what that means is not just including women, but also making it just for everybody who is usually excluded. So that could be persons with disabilities, youth, elderly, and it's part of TUMI, and we work as the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development's flagship initiative on gender equity in transport. So this is Germany based, and we work together with partners around the world, with regional partners such as FLO and Mujeres and Movimiento in Latin America, and then also Women on the Move in Asia. So just as a starting point, where are we with the women in our sector? According to the Asian Transport Outlook, around 14% of women in Asia, of workers in Asia are women. And this doesn't count also the informal workers, which we have to do a better job of counting of in general for the whole world. And around 12% of transport workers globally are women. And this is coming at a time that it's very important for us to consider really changing the way that we look at the sector. Because if we electrify without integrating gender, we risk modernizing inequality instead of transforming it. So we have to think of these questions like who gets the new green jobs, who accesses the EVs, who are being skilled, who's operating the new fleets. In each of these ways, like how we're thinking of how do we electrify things, it's an opportunity for us to think also how do we make it just and equal for the people who were not involved from the very beginning. So why we need to talk about inclusion for a just transition. I already mentioned this. If we focus on electrification, and just doing it like how we used to do it with our transport systems for cars, for public transport, for cycling, for walking, we might unintentionally still keep having this formalizing this male dominance in the sector, excluding also informal women workers who are part of the sector already, or and also reinforcing occupational segregation. So remember how we all went through the pandemic and we saw this is an opportunity for us to change the systems that we were previously in before the pandemic. Well, this is kind of like what's happening in the e-mobility sector, and we could change that as we are transitioning, because it could also open new green technical roles for women. It could also professionalize working conditions for the women who are already in the sector, introducing safer fleet standards, and also expanding women's leadership and roles in the mobility innovation in general. And I think the other speakers for today's panel will also expand on that. And I just wanted to also close, well, my speaking part with introducing this Remarkable Women Who Move the World, which is a campaign that we developed together with the International Transport Workers Federation 2 years ago to highlight that women are in the sector already, and we need to make it better for women to stay, to even be interested in the sector, but also to have upward mobility, to have a good life, to be in the sector. And I just want to share some quotes from some of the women who are working in the sector in India. They said, "Women are not weak. They fly planes, drive buses and metros. People who doubted me appreciate me today. This sector was designed with men in mind, but women work everywhere today. And our demand for a better, safer, healthier workplace is not just our fight, but we are fighting for everyone." So if you want to find out more about what we do and also this campaign, I can also share some links later in the chat. Um, and yes, we are also the Secretariat for the Global Alliance for Feminist Transport. If you're interested in that, I'll also share that in the chat later. But it's a global alliance to bring together all of the work that we're doing in gender in the sector. And I'm not sure if my time is up, but I will already um, give the floor to our next speaker. And I'm looking forward to the questions and the discussion for our panel later. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Keisha. This was a very nice context-setting presentation, getting us all kind of making us understand especially the importance of why we should integrate more women into the sector, as well as the opportunities there are in this e-mobility transition. So thank you for that. Let me now hand over to Yogesh. He will provide us with a very concrete example of integrating women into the transport workforce, in this case, logistics. And I guess we'll hear more about also changing the culture, as we also saw in the quotes, the very inspirational quotes that Keisha shared from women in India working in the transport sector. So over to you, Yogesh. Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ADB. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity. I'm Yogesh. I work with Event Cargo. Event Cargo was started in 2016. The idea was, how do you make public spaces more safer and accessible for women? There were three basic pillars. One is to increase access to public spaces for women, challenge gender norm in action, and third, increase women labor force participation in the Indian workforce. I'll briefly share our learnings, what we did, and then would want to show you a 1-minute video. So we tried deploying EV in 2017 when the EV infrastructure was not that developed in India, and obviously we failed at it. Range anxiety was there, adoption was not there, multiple other reasons. training and skilling is one area where we believe there's a lot of work that can be done, including creating spaces where mobility, in our understanding, in the past 10 years, mobility is the single most uh, factor behind deciding whether a woman would get employment or not, because women cannot get opportunities that she cannot reach. So we believe mobility is the core of the skilling program, but at the same time, you also need to couple it with other skill sets like logistics, digital literacy, financial literacy. Safety, we thought, was one of the biggest concern that every woman had who is getting into the platform economy, gig economy. And in the past 10 years, we have tried multiple things that has helped us retain women in this space. Finance obviously is one of the things that stands out, biggest deterrent for a woman to get into this space, because access to capital is almost nil, do not have a credit history, and hence majority of these women do not get loan from, say, formal credit system. Infrastructure has been a big challenge, right from how the wirings are done at the charging station, how they place batteries in different columns. They assume that women would have digital proficiency to use payment apps, and the space where these infrastructure, these charging stations are placed are also not very thought through. The last one is value chain. Whenever we deploy women in a particular sector, we just look at one vertical. We don't look at the sector holistically. So in our experience, we have tried a couple of things that has helped us retain women in this particular sector. Few interventions that we have done is around making sure that there is a space where women can get trained on multiple things along with mobility. To address the finance problem, we introduced something called first loss guarantee, where we have parked some amount with the bank, and the girls would then don't need to pay the down payment. We have incorporated safety by design in our processes. Every woman would deliver within 5-7 kilometers, would be tracked regularly to make sure that they stay safe. One of the discouraging trend that we have seen in the gig economy market is now the payment is done on bi-weekly basis or weekly basis, bi-monthly basis and weekly basis, which kind of take away the only opportunity that these women had to save money or to build their savings. So we want to bring it back to the monthly payment. We are still processing monthly payment, but the entire industry is leaning towards the weekly and bi-monthly payment. We have developed a framework called Shift Framework, where we work with organization to make sure that gender inclusion is part of uh, the the blueprint and not an afterthought, from infrastructure to policy to hiring. Because even if you train a woman, she would go and work at a place where people are not sensitized, the infrastructure is not apt, and she will drop out. Last one is infrastructure feedback loop, wherein we work with the EV companies and give them feedback on everything from weight of the battery to how batteries are placed in a swapping station, all of those things. I'll skip this slide, and this is one of the exercise, a funny exercise that we did at our office. Who can lift the battery? Because it was too heavy. I'll just play this video. And before this, I just want to mention that this is one of the most ambitious, and we believe in the past 10 years, the only thing that can address the problem of women mobility and EV holistically. India's gig economy is growing fast. By 2030, it will create 25 million jobs. But how many of these jobs will go to women? 50%? No. 10%? Still no. Even if just 1% go to women, that's 250,000 women who must be mobile. And that's the challenge. Mobility is the biggest barrier, keeping women away from you and education. To reach even 1% inclusion, we must train over 5,000 women every month. That's why even Cargo started the Women Mobility Center, a space where women teach women to ride 2 and 3 wheelers. In just 2 weeks, a woman learns how to ride.
use digital tools, and manage money. One stream, she is ready to earn, ready to study, ready to grow. The Women Mobility Center is not just about driving, it's about driving change. Every woman who learns to ride moves one step closer to independence. And every center built brings India closer to equal opportunity.
That is it from my side. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Yogesh. This was really interesting and quite a shocking number, this 1% of of women getting jobs in the gig economy, compared with the 99% actually of all of the jobs going to men. So a lot of work there still I see. And I think it's what you mentioned about kind of the whole point of the company in terms of challenging gender norms, getting more women in the public space, and getting women in action. I think this is a very good, very concrete example of doing that and actually changing culture as well. But we'll continue the discussions after all presentations. So thank you, Yogesh, for this. And I'll hand over now to Shritu from the Wuppertal Institute. And Shritu will be talking us through some of the project outcomes of a Solutions Plus project pilots engaging women in the transport workforce. So over to you, Shritu. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Please let me know if you can see my screen well and hear me.
Yes.
Perfect. So yes, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you, Johanna, and thank you, ADV, for having me to be part of this very interesting webinar. My name is Rita Shrestha from Wuppertal Institute, and today I'll present a gender inclusive e-mobility pilot project in Africa, in Kigali, Rwanda. As presented by the previous speakers, or maybe wrapping up again the issue here, so women face barriers in moving freely and safely, including exposure to also harassment. So globally, 3 out of 5 women report experiencing harassment in the public transport. As mentioned earlier, women are underrepresented in the transport workforce. So as this sector remains male-dominated, as Johanna also mentioned, that women are also making up only less than 15% of the transport workforce. So addressing this issue, I'll now present a pilot project focusing on promoting women drivers in electric mobility. So, so this project, or this is a part of the EU-funded Solutions Plus project, which has a Living Lab project in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe. In Kigali, we implemented the gender inclusive e-motor pilot projects through the co-development approach, working with several organizations. The project supported not only by deploying electric motorcycles, but also training for women to get the driving license. So people might think like getting a driving license may be simple, or may seem simple, but for many women it is a major obstacle which hinder them to get into the transport workforce and also socioeconomic independence. That was also the case in Kigali. So through this gender-specific training approach, we significantly improved the success rate. So based on this experience from the project, we also developed like 5-step checklist. So starting from planning, training them, retaining, evaluating, and also scaling those approach, which I briefly take you through in the following slides. These are also included in the report on the left, so I will also share the link of the report later. So the first step is planning. So starting understanding the local context. So in the earlier program in Kigali, in the region, like only 10 out of the 200 people, 200 women, for example, obtained the license. So we understood, like we saw the barriers why this has happened. So, for example, driving schools are not prepared for training the women. For example, there are also some cases of harassment which make them women not going into this field. There's also limited access of vehicles for practice in those training schools. So this also showed that we try to understand, like this showed that the need of proper planning with a collaborative approach specific for women is required. So in the training phase, we carefully selected the cohort of the driving schools and even the exam conditions. So as a result, nearly, is a very shocking or a positive thing, was like nearly 70% of the women, 24 out of 35, successfully passed the driving test. So this also highlighted or also demonstrated that the impact of targeted approach can have the highest success rate. The next comes the how to retain them, as also Yogesh mentioned. So they are trained also in India, and also now the case also for Kigali was like how to retain them, and it is not just enough to train the women, but also ensure that they continue working in the field on the real conditions. So we assess suitable services such as which services, for example, delivery or passenger service would be preferable, and also consider safety, working hours, and also physical demands. We also see the need of creating, for example, women-only group, allowing participants to share their experience and also support each other to be into that field or continue to be in the field. So after implementation, evaluation is also important. So for example, by collecting the feedback from the women drivers, how they experience, to better understand what motivates them and what are the challenges that still remain to be into the field, for example. And then finally, a successful element, which is the case in the Kigali also, the successful elements should be scaled and replicated in the region, in the same country or in different cities or in the region as well. So we should also expand the opportunities for women, not only for driving, but also, for example, encourage them to be into the technical roles in the transport sector, to have more women represented in the transport. So even after Solutions Plus, since this is a very interesting topic, we continue to follow the progress. So here are some snapshots. I just took it from the website. So there was also a second cohort for the driving license, and the success rate was even higher, marking to over 83%. That was together with UN Habitat and also with GIZ. Women-only community-based companies are providing delivery services and taxis. There were also women seen in Kigali for the new economic activities, such as Kigali Women-led Motor Tour for the tourism. And also a local company, Ampersand, is involving women in the technical roles in their company, and also as well as providing further training for mechanics for women. So I think this pilot has empowered women to enter and thrive in the transport sector in the region. And yeah, so if you are interested, please have a look at this publication, and thank you for listening. I guess I stay in the time. Johanna, back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, actually, the speakers. You kept your time very well, so thanks for that. So we'll have sufficient time for our discussions as well, which is great. But thank you, Shritu, for this really interesting experience. And I think it's always very helpful to share experiences cross region. We often talk about sharing experiences within the Asia Pacific region, but it's also there's probably a lot of lessons also beyond the region. So this was a very interesting pilot to hear about, and we'll talk about that one as well in a bit. So last but not least, we still have one more presentation to go before moving on to the discussions. So this presentation will be from Niti. working with ADB. She will be discussing the lessons from a study conducted on the opportunities of engaging women in the EV value chain in Bangladesh. So over to you, Niti. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll dive right in. Just to give you a quick study background before I get into the insights. So the objective of the study was to identify high impact entry points and provide actionable insights to support women's inclusion across the EV6 ecosystem. The idea was to have something very practical and useful, especially for a client, a private sector client called Tiger New Energy, who was our partner in the study. The duration was October 2024 to December 2025. It was delayed because of the political situation in the country, and the coverage included policymakers, private sector, men and women participating across the EV ecosystem, complemented by literature review and review of policies and regulations. And we used the draft study to conduct a validation workshop with key stakeholders in December last year. I also want to acknowledge the role of Yogesh, who's a fellow panelist, who played a key role in the study. So I think we have all discussed why it is important to include women in the EV sector. I just want to give further background of the context of Bangladesh. So the Bangladesh EV sector is characterized by a small and constrained formal EV sector and a large and unregulated informal EV sector. So just to give you an idea, there are, as of March 2025, there were 132 registered electric four-wheelers in the country versus over 6 million unregistered electric three-wheelers. Women are participating, so we are not starting with ground zero, but they are informal and continue to participate without support. Safety, affordability, and access shape women's mobility decisions in the country, like many other countries. However, safety is recognized as a binding constraint. In fact, 87% of women in the country report being sexually harassed in public spaces. Also, we thought the timing of the study was opportune because the Bangladesh is currently developing their electric vehicle industry policy. And the country also has a target of 30% EV adoption by 2030. So to ensure we have a resilient and inclusive sector, having insights on how to meaningfully engage women, we believe is critical. So we looked at different entry points of women across the EV value chain. We considered 7 key pathways, ranging from women as drivers to women as micro entrepreneurs in the EV ecosystem. So think about the garage owners, think about women vehicle lessors, think about the food stalls near the battery charging stations. We thought about women operating in charging and repair stations, manufacturing and assembly workers, women as skilled technicians and engineers, women in sales and customer service, and of course, the most obvious one, women as passengers. So we identified where women are already active in the EV ecosystem. And I think this might also be true for many other countries with similar context. So first was that women are early adopters of electric two-wheelers. And there's a growing share of women driven by the ease of use of electric two-wheelers and the lower operating costs. But the challenge remains high upfront costs, limited financing, and unclear registration processes. The second area was women's participation in the informal electric three-wheelers. Now, these are important for women's mobility because it serves a large number of daily commuters. But then we also saw, despite the cultural context of Bangladesh, women are participating as drivers, as lessors of vehicles, as garage owners, and as micro entrepreneurs. However, the roles remain unsafe, informal, and unsupported by policy and infrastructure. I mean, I think one of the common things that we hear from women who are operating as drivers are lack of toilets, and of course the harassment. So we continue to hear this during the interviews. And finally, we saw that there is also increase in women in manufacturing, services, and training roles. And this is particularly interesting in the context of Bangladesh, where majority women work in the ready-made garment manufacturing sector. And this sector is going through a transition. And what's interesting is that EV assembly and battery-related roles require skills where women are very proficient. So they require precision, they require, eye for quality, and they're perceived to be less physical. And women we see also emerging as very good service trainers, service agents and trainers. However, as the challenge which has also identified by my fellow panelists was that entry is limited by skills gap and gender biased recruitment. So this is a draft table, but I thought it's very interesting to share today. So we sat in a room full of policymakers, private sector companies, civil society, and we tried to map what were their priority areas, given what we know from the study. And we mapped it across 2 dimensions: how feasible it was in the current context of Bangladesh, which is going through a transition, and what is the scale of impact. And we identified that women as EV passengers emerged as one of the key areas. Of course, there are actions that are required to enable that. I don't have time to go into detail, but the study will be hopefully available soon. Women as entrepreneurs, garage owners, micro entrepreneurs, owners of charging station, also seem to be a very good way for women to transition out of some of the existing roles as they look to diversify their skills and livelihood opportunities. And the third was women in EV assembly line. Like I mentioned, this is quite a good direct fit for workers who are diversifying out of the ready-made garment industry. So what do we need to build an inclusive EV ecosystem? We identified 4 priority areas, and I think this might also be applicable to some of the other countries as they think about transitioning to EV. So first is embedding a gender lens in the draft EV policy. So like I mentioned, there is an existing draft policy, but it remains to be it is gender agnostic, and the policy frameworks before they formalize should ensure that licensing, registration, compliance pathways, etc., are accessible to women. Second, I think this is something we all talked about, enabling women's access to skills, finance, and markets. So like Yogesh mentioned, having products like first loss coverage and having financial institutions deliver them could enable women to come in as entrepreneurs, but also access other livelihood opportunities, and the skilling to be aligned with the needs of the industry. And safety as a core EV infrastructure. And finally, and I think this is one of the most important, which is shifting perceptions to influence policy. So how do we make sure that perceptions are not the constraint? And that could be through demonstration projects in high visibility area to show people that this is possible, that women can be drivers, garage owners, trainers, assembly workers, and also very important to ensure their sustainable and meaningful participation is to engage male allies in female mobility solutions. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nidhi, for this really interesting presentation. And I think it was fascinating to hear that women are already participating in a sector But of course, again, I think many of you actually mentioned this informality of the sector, which is a challenge. And here we see again in Bangladesh very concretely that many of the women drivers of the wheelers were informal workers as well, and how to then enhance their working conditions is a big question, of course. And the table was also very interesting that you the summary table of the feasibility, especially looking at the commercial drivers, which is again something that Yogesh is working with, which was seen as the least feasible kind of action to be taken. So probably a lot of challenges as well in India for Yogesh that you've encountered during your years of running Even Cargo. But let's now dive into our panel discussion. So thank you, all of you panelists, for a really fascinating introductory presentations. I think I learned a lot. I hope also the audience learned a lot. So we've heard many times or a lot about the why more diversity is needed, why more gender inclusion is needed. But maybe as a recap, very shortly, perhaps each of you can raise still what you see as the biggest systemic barriers that still limit women's inclusion. And also, if you can bring up one concrete action that you would like to raise still here that could help address these barriers. So maybe we do a quick round. Let's start with Keisha. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Joanna, and nice to hear what everyone is doing and up to. I think still one of the biggest barriers is that we don't know or we don't count the women who are working in the sector, not just in e-mobility, in the transport sector in general. A lot of women are working in the informal sector, as I think most of us have covered. And there are actually benefits to hiring women like formally. For Tumi, we had as part of the EBUS mission, we had trained women in Mexico, for example. And after the training, people or operators were saying it's worth investing in the women rather than having the electric buses idle, because they lose more money having the electric buses idle than to train the women. And the women are also, according to them, they drive safer, and they also had to adopt their working conditions to allow the women to be part of the sector. So it benefits people, not just women, it benefits a lot of people to improve working conditions and to recognize that women and people in general need better working conditions in the e-mobility sector. Um, yeah, so I pass it to anyone else who wants to answer as well.
Thanks, Keisha. Maybe I could just add also, we had a webinar, I think a few years back with La Rolita from Bogota, a women, or also a gender kind of equal e-bus company. And they also reported that the number of accidents was actually lower with women drivers. And that way they also saved some money there. I'll hand over to Yogesh if you want to lift some barrier and how we could overcome that one.
Yeah, just quickly, we thought that one of the ways you can make a case for women is by capturing data. So, in our experience, we have captured data and we found out that stations where women are employed, losses due to accidental damage and theft came down by over 18%. So, it directly translated into whatever our clients were looking for, the big e-commerce giants. So I think capturing data to make a case is important. And second, I believe uh, practitioners' idea to a particular problem adds a lot of value. As in, uh, if you run small pilots and try to understand from those pilots what the actual issues are, you would end up getting more insights which are implementable rather than just kind of looking at the problem from a macro perspective.
Thank you, Yogesh. So the importance of pilots as well, and very important, impressive number of that accidents also going down. Shritu, I'll hand over to you on this question.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. So barriers, I feel like there is still a cultural norms. Like sometimes women are discouraged by family and society. They still persist in the area or region where we are talking about. Also because women has care duties and also lack of financial support, like that's highlighted by other speakers as well. So mainly I'm talking about the low income communities and also for the informal transport, the sector that we are talking. So I think the need is the encouragement for the women, support, and also like proper planning based on the data, like Yogesh and Kesha mentioned. So to enter them into the transport work, so like I believe women are good planners, they are good technicians, and also we need to raise them as a decision makers roles as well. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Thank
it.
you, Ritu. Thanks, Ritu. You raised a very important point on this cultural norms, which I think affects in all countries globally what women kind of choose to do as well. And Neeti, do you want to add something?
At the risk of repeating some of the points already raised, but I think it's important to note that many countries in our region across the world are going through a societal transition. And the risks of women dropping out or being overlooked and their needs and constrained deprioritized is high. So, and of course, there has been also some skepticism that surrounds efforts around inclusion. So I think it's very important that we work to change perceptions, to address fear, and I think what Yogesh said, actually the proof of the pudding is in eating. So actually do it and show that it's possible and bring people along as we do that.
Thank you, Niti. And yes, I think it's a very good point on raising this societal transition aspect, because there's always a risk involved in kind of that kind of male-dominated aspects in societies will just be more and more formalized unless there. But it's also a big opportunity, right, for engaging more women. So. And that also goes for e-mobility, as we have discussed in general. So let's. I'd like to ask you, Keisha, what are the most effective strategies that you have seen talking about this cultural change and that we are, and a change of cultural norms that we need, that we have just heard about? What are the most effective strategies that you've seen to attract women into traditionally male-dominated workforce in the transport sector, and perhaps more specifically to e-mobility?
Yeah. So I think still one of the biggest things is this culture, right? Like people's perceptions on like who can even be in e-mobility, or what kinds of people can be in the mobility sector. Like previously in our old thinking, we would think, oh, transport sector, so you can be a driver. So like a driver, man. But actually, the transport sector is so huge, you know? And technically, we can count ourselves in the transport sector if you're working the transport sector. There's so many things that you can do. So, one of the biggest things is really this culture shift in our mindsets, that this is a sector that's so diverse and in need of also the diversity of people who need to be part of it. And we actually did like a joint publication together with the World Bank, also ADB and GIZ, um, on the barriers to women's participation in transport, not just e-mobility, but in transport in general, with some global examples. And we put it to 5 specific things in which we could have women stay in the sector. So first is the attraction and recruitment of women, even starting from the beginning. Who who is studying STEM, or how are we even like writing these job positions for women with women in mind? Second is HR policies and practices. Is it all right for women who have care work to work in the sector? Are they considered? Third is retention, career progression, and leadership. Once women are there, how could they move forward? How could we encourage women to stay or to thrive in the sector? Fourth is legal and policy framework. Sometimes in some countries, actually, it bars women from working in the transport sector for specific things, maybe because of old laws. And then finally, like what everybody has said here, is data collection and research. We have to know if the strategies have been effective, how many women in general are in the e-mobility sector. There's so many women in different parts of the e-mobility value chain that we need to recognize. And giving visibility to all of those is already very helpful to have more women in the sector, to be encouraged that, yeah, we want to be in this sector. So I think someone posted the chat. Christine posted the link to this study in the chat. So if anyone's interested, you can find out more there.
Thanks, Keisha. And I'm actually curious, maybe at least Yogesh, you may want to also answer this question, because what have you seen as the most effective strategies to attract women into logistics in your case? How have you managed to get women on board in your payroll or in the, yeah,
In
in
our
the sector?
understanding, awareness is not there. I mean, strategies can only work if you have awareness among masses. When they know that they can choose between A, B, and C. When it comes to logistics and transport, this is still not seen as a potential employer for a lot of women. I mean, not just from women's perspective, but from family or even institutions perspective. So I think first the awareness has to be there that there exists a job role which can be performed by women, which doesn't require high physical labor, which is doable. All of those things are important. And again, I think I'm doubling down on pilots because we are running a project with GIZ as well in 2 cities in India. So the thing is that it's a research study followed up with a pilot. So you know that what you have studied has some grounding or not. And from that pilot, you can have learnings that can then be scaled at a policy level. So I think those studies needs to be I mean coupled with pilots. I think that in my opinion is one thing that we should focus on.
Thank you. Thanks, Yogesh. I see we have a lot of interesting questions also in the Q&A. Let me go through a round of questions also for Neeti and Shritu, and then we'll look into those questions. I'll try to get at least one or two of them. So Neeti, as you were conducting your studies, so what opportunities did you see emerging from these studies and the EV kind of ecosystem or investment landscape in Bangladesh that can support women's participation in the EV value chain? I think you already mentioned a couple, but do you want to raise a couple of kind of opportunities for Bangladesh, but maybe also that could be replicated in other countries in the region?
In the interest of time, I'm just going to mention two. And the first one is that we have a once only opportunity to embed gender from the get-go into the policy and regulatory frameworks. The government of Bangladesh has announced that they will formalize their EV industry policy this year. So I think there is a risk of formalizing EV sector without women's needs embedded. And then the second is, I think, absolutely essential that there are minimum safety standards in EV workplaces, in EV infrastructure. So safeguards, safe facilities, grievance mechanisms, so that formalizing expands women's participation rather than narrowing it. So, yeah.
Thank you, Niti. And I think, yeah, many of you have raised this safety aspect, and I think it seems to boil down to very simple things as well, right? In terms of having toilets available and facilities available that serve women's needs as well. Let me move over to Shritu. So we have been talking about the really big importance of pilot projects in these kinds of settings for they can help change the culture as well, right? Seeing that, okay, women can actually work in these fields or do these activities in the sector. But how can we move, in your view, from project or pilot projects to a more systemic change in the sector? Where's the linkages there?
Yeah, thanks, Johanna. So the pilot project, since we have been working with the implementation project for quite some time, for a few years. So the beauty of pilot project, as also the case I presented, are very local, real need based. And there's also the involvement of strong engagement with various stakeholders in the field to co-create, to co-design and implement the solutions. So doing this, we are already embedding the aspects of replication and also scaling up. So we are not just doing it just for implementation, but we also think like how to scale them up, looking at the business opportunities, aligning with financing and policy implications. So as I said, it involves different stakeholders, including policymakers, including the industry, including the academia, and so forth. So these pilots, with these co-creation aspects, have a strong potential, as you mentioned, to drive the systemic change in the sector. So I would say it's more about the integration and also engagement with various stakeholders. Yeah, that's the key point, I would say. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm seeing a question in the chat from John West on what would you like to see city municipalities to do to improve women's inclusion in the e-mobility sector? And maybe I would like to expand this also a bit further. There was a question from Abhishek Mukherjee. Sorry about the pronunciation. That kind of what kind of policy what is the role of policy in kind of scaling up women's participation? So maybe also on a national level or on a city level, policy actions or other actions that governments on a local or national level can take. What would be your recommendation towards that? I think I'll just hand over the word to anyone who wants to come in here.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I think two ways. One is procurement, and the other is training. And these are the two things that in any city, everywhere, can help with, and also private sector, honestly. When you're procuring and training, think about who are we procuring or who is part of this? And think about the women out there who have the opportunity or could have this opportunity to be part of the sector.
So just to quickly add, and maybe Yogesh would have some thoughts on this too. When we were discussing this with a private sector company, a provider of e-mobility solutions, they were discussing with universities, campuses, and special economic zones on how e-bikes could be leveraged as a safe and easy solution for women. So if creating that kind of infrastructure, enabling that so that women are users, and its accessible infrastructure could be a possible local body level intervention.
Thank you, Niti. Yogesh, did you want to add something on from a company perspective, what would you need from the policy or government side in creating an enabling environment?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Neeti said. As far as an organization which is working towards including women into non-traditional livelihoods, I think uh, uh, two, three things. One, we should not focus on grants when we want to give vehicles to women. We should create some entity, something from where it can be given in a way that is more sustainable. Because if you just give away the vehicle, it doesn't yield the desired result. That is one. Second, I think an organization like ADB or other big multilaterals can actually push for inclusion with the projects that they are doing. They can actually say that we're gonna do this project. Let's do this gender lens assessment of how we're gonna include different genders into this program. And last, I believe that we should not invest in skill development unless we have clarity on where the women gonna land, where she's gonna join. I think those dots needs to be connected before throwing money in skill development, because it's just a sheer waste of resources. It's not gonna get us anywhere if we do not have the holistic picture in mind, clear as to where it would be and how would it make women to sustain in that particular job. Thanks.
Thank you. I see also a question in the chat, or maybe more of a comment on policy coherence and the importance of that, and definitely, of course, important to look at it from a bigger picture as well on a national level to ensure that different aspects of the ecosystem are targeted through policies. Yes, definitely. Thanks for that question or comment. We are starting to run out of time, unfortunately. I see there's a lot of questions. I appreciate uh, the activity of everyone. I think this is really great. If it's okay for the panelists, we'll go for one final round of questions before ending. So I think there are quite a few practitioners working in development, working with projects, perhaps in our audience here today. So for practitioners who are looking at developing e-mobility projects, very shortly, what aspects would you recommend that they need to think about to incorporate in project design to ensure that women can engage as active players in the sector? Of course, this will depend a lot on the project, but if you have some specific aspect you want to raise still before closing, also thinking about this as a closing round of comments. Happy to hear. So maybe we'll start the reverse order. So Neeti, we'll start with you.
Sorry, I was looking at the questions and there was one on policy convergence, and I got distracted by that because what we also found in our study is how different points of the value chain reinforce each other. So the point on convergence was there, but on specifically on your question, I think it's important. The first thing, even when we were starting out to do this research, the first thing that came to our mind was women as drivers, and we wanted to do a pilot. But now, after having studied the entire picture, we realized that's probably the least feasible and least impactful at this point in time, and we need to prioritize other areas in the value chain. So perhaps looking at it more holistically and thinking about where your intervention is going to yield most results. And of course, like Yogesh said, tying it to actually real demand from the industry on skills that are needed and the financial products that are required. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Shritu, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, maybe I was just thinking and listening to all the discussions and presentation. Maybe I was just thinking of wrapping up myself and on the question that you have mentioned. So women needs encouragement. They still needs there is still a need to include the safe and accessible workplaces. Of course, gender responsive policies, or strengthen or develop the gender responsive policies by different levels of the governance, the city government as well as national government as well. Very important is the access to finance. So this has been a great barrier or a strong barrier for having them into the field. And also there is also need to have the visible role of the women in the sector, in a sense, have them encourage them to be in the field and also retain them. So that could be a need for women in the e-mobility transition. Yeah.
Thank you, Shruti, for this very good wrap up. Yogesh, to you.
Nothing more to add. I agree with what panelists have said.
Good. And Keisha, the last word to you.
Yeah, I just want to encourage everyone in the sector to have empathy, actually. Have empathy. If you don't know what women want, ask what and see what they need instead of assuming. If you are in a position of power, if you are male in a space where there's not a lot of females, why don't you include a woman? Why don't you ask women or the people who are usually excluded what they need, what they want even? And that goes for anything in life and in the sector. And that's my closing remark.
Thank you, Keisha. I think that was a wonderful closing remark, and I fully uh, agree with that. Empathy is definitely something needed more broadly in this world, and also in terms of understanding other people's needs will definitely help develop better projects. So, thank you so much for this really fascinating discussion. I think we could have gone on for another hour easily discussing these topics and the different aspects of it. Thank you also for our participants for the questions. I've actually copied in the questions And let's see if we can try to get back. We did not have time to go through all of them, so let's see if we can get back in written form to some of them still that were left unanswered. So thanks a lot for sending in those. I guess as a summary or a wrap up, also from my side, I think we've heard a lot of the need for data. Also looking at the informal sector, a lot of data is missing from there. To do better planning, of course, we need to understand what's actually happening there. But also change of culture and having these examples of women in the sector through pilots, through other initiatives, very important. The role of government in training, in providing an enabling policy environment, of course, key, and then access to finance on different levels will also be really important. And in very concrete terms, the safety and the working conditions came up many times. So I think that's also worth emphasizing still. So thank you, Neeti, thank you, Shritu, thank you, Yogesh, and thank you, Keisha, for your really insightful presentations. Much appreciated, and for your time today. We can I have Christine the slide on we have an evaluation form. So if you want to send us feedback to all of you participants, you can send us feedback through the QR code that should come up on the screen very soon, or posted in the chat. We are happy to hear about your views on topics that would be interesting to cover as part of the webinar series that we have under the e-mobility support and investment platform. So do share us your thoughts through this QR code. We are going on a small break with the webinars. At the moment, we are planning ahead for the Transport Forum, which will take place, ADB's Transport Forum taking place on the 19th to 22nd of May in Manila. So I hope to see some of you at least there as well. And yeah, have a great rest of the day and look forward to seeing you in our future events. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.